So, RJ, my boy, we're going to begin with story time as we, your parents, chronicle some of the more memorable events of the early years of your life. We hope you enjoy this trip down memory lane and get a few laughs along the way. And the rest of you, if you get bored, just get another drink. So, starting at the beginning would put us early in the morning of January 11th, 1978. That would turn out to be your birthday, or as George R. Martin likes to say, your name day. I got up at about 5 o'clock and headed into work, as was my custom then, because we were having a decertification battle with the Steelworkers Union, and I had to meet on every shift. So I woke up, and Mary was complaining that she had some contractions, and of course she'd been saying that for days, and so I didn't pay much attention, got dressed, and headed out to work. So I'll let Mary continue from there.
I woke up about 5 a.m. and I had some slight contractions. So since they woke me up actually, and then Bob was up because he was leaving early that day because of this steel worker thing. So I said, Bob, I want you to stay because I'm really having these contractions. He said, oh no, this is really important. I got to go do this, and I'll get there, and I'll come right back home after that. So fortunately, my mom was visiting because the contractions were getting stronger, and she called down to the plant to make sure that we were that he, as soon as he got there. He was told, okay, you got to go back because your wife needs to get to the hospital. And so we got to the hospital, and you were born around 9 o'clock. So it happened very quickly.
Well, you can imagine as a proud father, a firstborn son, I was quite excited. I'd been prepared and had covered the front door of the house by the time that mother and son came home with a huge "It's a Boy" poster to welcome them home appropriately, and decorated the inside of the house with balloons, and of course Nan helped me with all of that. I bought a bunch of "It's a Boy" cigars for friends and the guys at work, and I'm not sure if people still do that, but it was popular then, and I still remember getting back into the plant later in the day. And one of the workers at the plant reminded me, as assistant plant manager at the time, it's probably not a great idea to bring cigars onto an explosives manufacturing site. The guy probably voted for the steelworkers.
So because our family was growing, we had outgrown our O'Day 22 sailboat, and we bought a new. We got a new boat. We got the Pearson 30 sailboat. And RJ got on that boat when he was 3 months old, and that was in April. And so we had a little sweet nickname for him. We called him RJ the Sailor Man.
Moving on from Hagerstown, Maryland to Chadsford, Pennsylvania.
So RJ started first grade in Chadsford Elementary School, and I went to the first parent-teacher conference. And the teacher said that only get a couple of good hours a day from RJ, that he really doesn't wake up until after lunchtime. What's a parent to do? I mean, there he was. How do you make a kid go to sleep? He's been a natural night owl, and that continues till today.
RJ was great at telling jokes in that period. He loved telling jokes rapid fire. He barely gave you time to laugh between the jokes. He had a joke book somewhere, I'm sure, and didn't recognize that some of the jokes were a little off color, but it was reported back to us by our neighbors, the Peters, when they were bringing RJ and Holly back from camp one summer. It was quite a long car trip, apparently, and RJ told jokes, many off color, the whole way home, as I understood it from them. He was also a little Johnny Carson, amazing people with a wide assortment of magic tricks. So he was quite the entertainer.
RJ loved white food. And we called him Doughboy. He loved bread, all kinds of bread, but especially that nice spongy Wonder Bread, that was really good. White spaghetti, um, potatoes of any kind, but vegetables, no. I gave him vitamins to take every morning, and sometimes he would be a little trickster and he'd take that vitamin and stick it underneath the plate. So when I cleared off the plate after they had gone on the school bus, there it was. There was the vitamin still there. So what's a mother to do?
So another aspect to RJ early on was his love of animation came quite early. We had one of the original Apple computers and the early Stickman software for animation, and he loved working on that, and it was a sign at an early age of things to come.
Craig Amhouse and other neighborhood kids and RJ would play in the woods surrounding our house without adult supervision. And this is something that children today, unfortunately, cannot have the freedom to do anymore.
RJ also loved to be a trickster, not only with the vitamins, but he loved putting rubber snakes under the sheets in the guest bedrooms, especially when his Aunt Lori was coming. He tormented her. Finally, she caught on, and but it was always a good laugh. And as far as sports goes, he was at an age where he's very impressionable with sports teams, and so as many of you know, is an Eagles and Phillies fan for life from the period we lived there. The Phillies, of course, won the World Series in 1980, and we used to go watch Steve Carlton pitch, which was a real treat and all that. But one of the funnier stories of that time was we went to spring training one year when Randall Cunningham was the Eagles quarterback, and so after practice, RJ stood dutifully in line to get his autograph as he headed to the locker room, but unfortunately when Cunningham got to RJ and we gave him the pen, he gave him the pen didn't work, and so we didn't get the autograph, so it was kind of a long ride home. From Chadsford, Pennsylvania to London, England, RJ developed an appreciation for international cuisine when we crossed the pond, and especially for Chinese food in London. So for his 12th birthday, we all went out to celebrate at a local high-end Chinese restaurant, and RJ ordered the entire meal. You can imagine the astonished look on the waiter's face when I directed him to my 12-year-old son to order what turned out to be about an 8-course meal. Plenty of crispy duck, but the waiter did come back and talk to both RJ and I at the end and complimented him on his knowledge of Chinese cuisine.
RJ loved to ride the tube. He had memorized all the stations and the routes, and so when we went out as a family, we had a personal guide. When we had guests, he also took the guests out, and they were quite astonished that he had such knowledge of the city. We were also very lucky that he didn't hurt himself sliding down those long escalators at St. John's Wood where we lived later.
On the handrails.
Yes.
That was scary. Another fun memory from the American School in London was RJ asked me one day if I'd be willing to coach he and his friends' basketball team. That's the way they did it at ASL. The fathers were the coaches of the teams for basketball and baseball. So I agreed, and we were a ragtag bunch up against the Farmer family, who always won the championships for basketball and baseball. Mr. Farmer was a big benefactor of the school, and Johnny was his star athlete's son. So as it turned out, we had a slow start in basketball, but we got into the playoffs and were able to beat them in the championship game. And so the boys asked me if I'd coach baseball and keep our team together, and so I agreed. And we were lucky enough to do it again, and we beat them in the championship game with Johnny pitching, which was a lot of fun. RJ played second base and on baseball, and was a guard on the basketball team. One of the nice things about living in London was all the great family trips we were able to take out of there to regions nearby.
Tenerife. That was one of the first study activity tour trips that we went on. And what was nice about that it was other families from the school. So we had adults to be with, and the kids had other kids that they could be with. One of the things in Tenerife, they have the custom of women being topless for bathing. And that was the first time that RJ had experienced that. And at a young age, that was quite an experience for him. One of the things that he did was he and his other friends came over and were taunting Holly and telling her that she needed to join into the local customs, which she was very sort of annoyed with him. And then he also, as he was talking and looking at the different women, he would start pointing at the women, and she would say, "Stop doing that! Stop pointing!" So another trip we went on was China. And after 9 days, we saw all the sights in China, and the Great Wall and temples and everything. So it was a great trip. And then we got to Hong Kong. RJ made a beeline for the McDonald's.
One of the family trips that everybody thought was one of the best was the safari to Africa. In addition to enjoying the animals up close, RJ and Heather and Mary had a field day shopping and bargaining with all the Africans selling their crafts. And we still have a lot of those around, but Holly and I were bored to death, but RJ certainly and did enjoy that. One of the things that we remember from the trip to the Netherlands, to Holland, Amsterdam, was that RJ almost got run over by a motorbike who was illegally in a bike, roaring down a bike lane, and fortunately at the last second RJ saw him and was able to barely get out of the way. We also, in London every winter, went skiing to the Alps, several times to Austria, and one of the things that I remember about one of the trips was Holly and RJ had this skiing instructor in Austria whose signature thing was that he yodeled while he led them down the mountain on the ski lesson. And that was all well and good, but they got to a point where there was a area where they had to use a T-bar to get up to a certain place. And initially, I think RJ and Holly fell off the T-bar because it was pretty steep. But then they started laughing about it, and they kept falling off. And the ski instructor got so upset with them that he was shouting at them and threatening that he was going to walk off the lesson. And that was pretty funny. So an ASL school did trips that they sponsored for the kids. Each class went on one trip each year, and RJ's class one year went to Thailand and Southeast Asia, and it was a great trip. And we were living in London, so I got up in the morning and was watching the news, and there was a bloody coup in Thailand, and I was looking at the hotel. It was a makeshift hospital at the time, and it was the same hotel that was on RJ's itinerary. So we were pretty worried because the communication wasn't as swift as it is now. But as it turned out, the school group had left for Cambodia the day before, so he just managed to miss the bloody coup in Thailand. So those are some of the travel logs from London. Moving from London, England to Sydney, Australia, when we arrived, RJ was not thrilled with attending the Sydney Church of England Coeducational Grammar School with required school uniform of a straw boater hat, a blue sport coat, school tie, gray slacks, black shoes, and the obligatory school pin. So when school was over, RJ was quick to strip off the tie and hat on his way home, but the neighbors, he soon discovered, were reporting him back to the sergeant major at the school for disrespecting the school uniform. And this sergeant major was a badass ex-Army Ranger type that the school hired to keep the kids in line, and he particularly had it in for RJ because he was a Yank.
This is another food story about RJ. just for convenience, sometimes we would have leftovers, and but when RJ wasn't eating too much, I was getting a little concerned. You know, he didn't seem to be that hungry at dinner time. So one evening, an hour after we had dinner, the doorbell rings, and I go to the door, and it's the pizza man. It's like, whoa, we didn't order pizza, we just had dinner. Well, the pizza man missed the directions. He was supposed to go around, not ring the front door, but he was supposed to go around to the side and ring the doorbell on the lower level, right where RJ's bedroom was. So he was caught out.
All of you know about RJ's fear of sharks. If it wasn't initially developed in Australia, it was fixated for life there. His mates that he ran with liked to jump off the sprit bridge and swim across as fast as they could to the other side. And it was a well-known nurse shark breeding area, and nurse sharks aren't the most aggressive sharks in the world, but at the end of the day, they're still sharks. And also in Australia, they have the shark nets at all the beaches. But at low tide, it's quite obvious that there's big holes in these steel shark nets. And when RJ saw that, swimming at the beaches became less attractive. But it was Australia, and there's a lot of water sports there. And so RJ got a surfboard, and after school, he could take the bus out to Manly and surf at Manly Beach. But I think the fear of sharks actually got to him in that sport as well. Plus it's really hard. So we kind of gave up on the surfing. And he came to me one day and asked me if I would be his buddy, and not buddy, and he meant buddy to go to scuba class. So we went to the PADI school in Sydney, and where it was like going to boot camp with the Aussies. But one day, the instructor, when we were learning to buddy breathe, said to RJ that that he might consider giving the air hose back to his father a little more quickly next time. So we finally mastered sharing the one tank and buddy breathing, which was good because one of our diving trips in Australia, I think it was Great Barrier Reef, RJ's low pressure line broke and the bubbles were coming up by his head. He looked like an angel, and we were pretty deep, and so we had a chance to buddy breathe to the surface, and so it all ended well. But he soon outdistanced me. He got deep water certifications and nighttime certifications, and I know it's one of the things he really enjoyed about Australia.
So one time when we were on the Great Barrier Reef, RJ and I went snorkeling. And I didn't know, but RJ had snuck some crackers from the dinner before, and he put them in his bathing suit pocket. Well, he started opening up the crackers, and the crackers were floating all around the water. Well, hundreds of fish came towards us. So RJ pushes me towards the fish and gets behind me. Now, we're talking about a 16-year-old boy. You know, he's not 6.
Sorry, RJ.
It was scary.
Sorry, RJ, we had to include that one. No video about RJ the Sailor Man would be complete without a few sailing stories. We have a lot of them in this family, but one of the more adventuresome trips we took was from St. Lucia to Granada. And one of the things that RJ particularly liked about that trip was meeting all the customs officers who were always characters, and experiencing the convoluted processes for clearing customs at all these little tiny islands. And every day it was a new island, every island a different procedure. And of course they made you wait forever and did it on their own sweet time. And then there was the ritual that we went through every day of raising and lowering the proper pennant flags for follow the customs laws and instructions. So it was a good trip, and got a couple of pictures. I don't know if Heather's going to get these pictures or not, but this was a picture of from the trip from St. Lucia to Granada. And of course, we all have been, or most of us have been to the BVIs at least once, if not more than once. And know all about Foxy's and so forth. One time we were in Joost van Dyke in the harbor there in front of Foxy's, and I made the rookie mistake of backing over the dinghy painter, which is a line to the dinghy, and it wrapped around the shaft, of course. And but no worries. RJ and his good buddy Rick Norton skin dived with knives to cut the line free. And as I recall, there wasn't too much blood in the water afterwards, but he did get the job done with Rick. And this is one of my favorite pictures of all time, with us hanging out with Foxy. Those are the good old days when he actually was still entertaining.
That's Foxy was entertaining.
Correct.
Okay, and who could forget the millennial celebration in the BVI's? There was a big party going to go on at Joost van Dyke.
Thousands of people.
Yes, and so even though we had the sailboat, we decided that we would take the ferry over there rather than get ourselves jammed in there with all the boats that were going on. So we took the ferry over, and we're talking and telling ourselves, you know, this is going to be a long night. Now we're going to pace ourselves with our drinking so that, you know, we'll go back on the ferry. Well, RJ kind of got ahead of us, and he came back with 2 cranberry juice and vodkas in his hand, and he was all excited saying, "They're $2." So that was the start of the evening.
Yeah, so much for pacing ourselves, and believe me, it continued at that pace. But a very memorable way to welcome in this new century, since we're talking about birthdays here.
And one more thing. There's a secret we've been keeping from you, RJ, for the last 40 years. I am Queen Amidala, and you are my son. Now, the Star Wars script said that I died during childbirth, but obviously that's not right, because here I am 40 years later. So I also want to introduce you to your father.
Luke, I am your father.